Welcome to Slaughterhouse Stories. I hope you enjoy the stories I have for you tonight. Hello to all you things that go bump in the night. Hello to all you humans as well. Welcome to the show that brings you creepypastas, short scary stories, and dark horror-themed poetry from all across the world. This is the Slaughterhouse Stories Podcast, episode 37, and a spooky tale. I'm your host and narrator, Ghost Train, telling you to lock your doors, get under your blankets, and keep the lights on. You can find the links to all my socials in the show notes. Come, discuss all things spooky with me. Also, if you'd like to write in and have your email read on the show, email slaughterhousestoriespodcast@gmail.com with creepypasta requests, stories you've written, or your own real-life paranormal encounters. Before we get to tonight's first story, I'd like to ask you a favor. If you're enjoying the show, please head over and leave a review through iTunes and help spread the word to your friends, family, the big black dog with red eyes staring at you, whomever. Tell them, be a listener, not a victim. Now, let's get spooky. Tonight, we start off with a story credited to Dan. Yes, Dan. Look, I've checked, and their name is just Dan. Let's not focus on it. Anyway, Dan's story about a group of friends who went hiking in a snow-covered wilderness. Everything was fine, until one member of the group felt like they were being watched. Blurs of movement, and even human-like eyes staring them down at night. What does this cold, snowy wilderness have in store? Stay somewhere warm, relax, and enjoy Frozen Release. A few years ago, I went hiking in northern Oregon with 5 close friends. Although we had planned the trip for months, we had no control over the weather, which had turned especially snowy and cold upon our arrival. Regardless, we decided to carry on with the hike. We were all quite experienced and well prepared, so none of us really gave it a second thought. The wilderness was stunning. The blankets of snow had given the landscape a dreamlike quality. It almost seemed like a crime to disturb the unbroken white expanse before us with our footprints. As time passed, the sky became noticeably darker, while the temperature dropped even more. At negative 23 degrees Fahrenheit, you can't afford to leave any skin exposed for more than a few minutes. It really is amazing how sensitive the body is to extreme cold. I had the feeling we were being watched. I would catch momentary flashes of movement, or a brief glimpse of something pale in the underbrush, but I could never make out the form. It was unsettling, but I tried not to think about it. In any case, it was hard to think about anything besides the temperature, which had fallen to negative 29 degrees Fahrenheit. One night, I ventured out of my tent to urinate. As I approached the perimeter of a heavily wooded area, I saw eyes which were undeniably human, staring back at me from the darkness. As soon as I saw them, they retracted back into the shadows. Spurred to action, I drew my hunting knife and ran towards where I saw the eyes. I sprinted through the blackness of the woods, chasing after what seemed to be a naked human form. After following the figure's winding path, I found myself at a huge blank clearing that continued to the horizon, where I saw a faint gold glow in the distance. The vacant white field before me seemed haunting, yet inviting. I knew the gold light was civilization. I had no choice but to go there, since there was no chance I could find my way through the woods back to the campsite. I started walking. The frigid air pierced my layers and made me gasp for breath. The cold around me was almost dense enough to be palpable. Slowly, figures began to take shape around me. They were pallid, naked people who appeared to fade in and out of the air. All of them were staring at me and speaking in hushed, synchronized whispers.
Set yourself free.
I kept my eyes to the ground and kept walking. In my state of mind, I didn't care about the paranormal phenomenon I was witnessing. I was worried about the cold. My hands and ears had begun to go numb.
Don't fight the cold. Become one with it.
I blocked out their whispers. They couldn't possibly be real anyway. I must be hallucinating from hypothermia. Is that possible?
You've reached your limit. Now embrace the cold and be liberated from all limits.
I couldn't help but smile. I wasn't planning on dying today. I was close to death, but even closer to salvation. I looked up to see two lines of the naked, ghostly figures on both sides of me, all staring.
Don't curse the cold. You can't understand its beauty until you transcend the confines of living.
Don't they understand that the confines are what give life value? Of course, death sets you free, but that would be meaningless without the vulnerability you face in life. I shivered. At this point, my hands, ears, and nose were completely numb.
A new existence awaits you, one without fear or pain.
A gust of frosty wind stopped me in my tracks. The cold was agonizing, but I wasn't ready to give up. I was most tired I'd ever been in my life, but I couldn't lay down. Not yet.
Do you take pride in your weakness? Why do you fear invulnerability?
I don't fear invulnerability. I would love to be freed from the shackles of mortality, to experience the world in ways I couldn't in life. My vulnerabilities prevent me from truly living out my dreams, but no, I can't die now. Suddenly, a white, naked ghost appeared in front of me, with a grin on his face.
Then join us.
The wind stopped. Silence filled the air. I looked at the spirits around me, unburdened, at peace, free. My whole body was tingling with frost. I took off my jacket, threw off my gloves and hat, and pried off my boots. I shed every piece of clothing I had, and I threw myself on my back. I gazed at the stars above me, even as my vision started to fade. I smiled when I realized I was viewing eternity. That's right. Listen to the ghostly voices. March towards them. Embrace them. They, mean you no harm. Even through the stinging cold, the ghostly realm is home. I hope the blankets kept you warm as you listened, because that one human definitely didn't stay warm. Stay under them though, as I move us to the next story of the night, about a tavern next to an alley. This alley has a haunting history, and the rumors alone are enough to keep people from going into it. No one really knew if anything was out there, but a loud drunk just might give everyone the chance to see if it's real. Tighten up on those blankets, stay out of the alleyways, and listen to The Ghost in the Alley. Rumors were rife about the alleyway behind the tavern. It was haunted, folks said. Haunted by the ghost of a young girl who had been found murdered in that self-same passage. People avoided the small street after dark, for the spirit was said to be a vengeful one. Of course, no one could name anyone whom the ghost had actually killed, but the tales were enough to keep people away from the alley at night. Fortunately for the owners of the tavern that backed onto the alley, their front door faced a well-lit road, and so business was not slack. Then one night, while the tavern was full of drinkers, A nasty character named O'Hare wandered into the bar. Women and children were not safe in his presence, but especially not women. After O'Hare had consumed far too much alcohol, he suddenly announced at the bar that he'd seen a pretty young thing in the alley out back at the tavern. The bartender froze in the middle of polishing a glass, and the men around the bar exchanged covert glances. No one said a word, but everyone was thinking about the ghost of the vengeful young girl. Everyone in the bar looked at his or her glasses as he stumbled to his feet. No one made a move to stop him, and there were quiet whispers of he deserves what's coming to him about the bar as O'Hare left the building. It's just too bad that there isn't really a ghost, thought the bartender, setting down the shining glass and picking up another one to polish. O'Hare sorely needed a lesson in human kindness and respect for others. At that moment, a horrible scream came from the alley. Everyone in the tavern looked up in shock and fear. Had there really been a ghost out there? Or was O'Hare up to his old tricks, and now accosting one of their women folk? The men leapt to their feet and raced to the back door of the tavern, pouring out into the street. They were met by an unnatural cold, and their eyes were dazzled by a blaze of light. The bartender thrust his way to the front of the crowd and saw the body of O'Hare laying in a pool of bright white light. His throat had been torn to pieces, and blood was spilling out in gushes. Above him hovered the semi-transparent figure of a young girl, her eyes gleaming with red fire, her mouth covered with blood. She glanced down at O'Hare and then turned to look at the crowd. The specter licked the blood from her lips thoughtfully, her eyes on the bartender's neck. Then she vanished, taking the light with her. At their feet, O'Hare gasped out his last breath and died. The local authorities were summoned to deal with the body of O'Hare. Though skeptical at first, they were finally convinced, since there had been so many eyewitnesses who had seen the ghost hovering over the dying man. The bartender resigned his position the next morning and took a job across town. He was prompted to look elsewhere for employment because of the memory of the ghost's hungry stare at his neck. I love when humans just march right to us, not knowing what's going to happen. And then you get to learn. It's just so much fun. O'Hare found out that no matter how big, loud, or drunk you are, humans are not a match for the vengeful spirits. Put your Bible down. It's not going to help. Now, let me give you this week's recommendation. This week, I'm again recommending a book by a Latin American author, and this one is dripping in Latin American themes. Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. The jazz age is in full swing, but Cassiopeia Tun is too busy cleaning the floors of her wealthy grandfather's house to listen to any fast tunes. Nevertheless, she dreams of a life far from her dusty small town in southern Mexico. Yet this new life seems as distant as the stars, until the day she finds a curious wooden box in her grandfather's room. She opens it and accidentally frees the spirit of the Mayan god of death, who requests her help in recovering his throne from his treacherous brother. Another amazing book from this amazing author, and a perfect choice to recommend during Latin American Heritage Month. So go and pick up this book, or I can simply haunt you until you do. Now that I've given you this week's recommendation, let's take a trip down open mic night at Beelze Pub. Welcome, fiends, to open mic night at Beelze Pub, where we invite you to sit right here and go into the more poetic side of fear. Poems of murder, creatures, and ghosts. All the things that scare you the most. Tonight at the pub, we have 3, that's right, I said 3, poems by the great Edgar Allan Poe. The first 2 are on the shorter side, like 5'1", so I figured I should give you an extra poem. First, in one of his final poems, we hear about a knight searching for something men in history have searched for ages. The second is describing both the sadness and happiness of his life, and using the things in nature to describe it. And finally, as someone laments the loss of the one they love the most, and how without her light, there is only darkness. So lean back into the chairs, follow the rhymes, and enjoy El Dorado, Evening Star, and To One in Paradise. Gaily bedight, a galley at night, in sunshine and in shadow, had journeyed long, singing a song, in search of El Dorado. But he grew old, this night so bold, and over his heart a shadow fell as he found no spot of ground that looked like El Dorado. And as his strength failed him at length, he met a pilgrim shadow. Shadow, said he, where can it be, this land of El Dorado? Over the mountains of the moon, down the valley of the shadow, ride, boldly ride, the shade replied, if you seek for El Dorado. "'Twas noontide of summer, and midtime of night, and stars in their orbits shone pale through the light of the brighter cold moon, mid planets her slaves, herself in the heavens, her beam on the waves. I gazed a while on her cold smile, too cold for me. There passed as a shroud, a fleecy cloud, and I turned away to thee, proud evening star in the glory afar. And dearer thy beam shall be, for joy to my heart is the proud part thou bearest in heaven at night, and more I admire thy distant fire than that colder, lowly light." Thou wast that all to me, love, for which my soul did pine, a green isle in the sea, love, a fountain and a shrine, all wreathed with fairy fruits and flowers, and all the flowers were mine. Ah, dream too bright to last, ah, starry hope that didst arise, but to be overcast, a voice from out the future cries, on, but over the past. Dim gulf, my spirit hovering lies, mute, motionless, aghast. For alas, alas, with me, the light of life is over. No more, no more, no more. Such language holds the solemn sea. To the sands upon the shore shall boom the thunder-blasted tree, or the stricken eagle soar. And all my days are trances, and all my nightly dreams are where thy dark eye glances, and where thy footstep gleams. In what ethereal dances, by what eternal streams. The knight fails his quest and is off to the Valley of Shadow. What fun! The evening star shows the man his happiness every night, but also everything bad. And we all know the darkness that follows when you no longer have the one that is your light. Poe certainly knew. I love nights at the pub when Poe makes an appearance. But now that we are finished, let's have a pub and make our way back home for tonight's main feature. Once again, it is Latin horror. This week, to continue celebrating Latin American Heritage Month, I'm very excited to bring you something special. A story from a listener, but not just any listener. This story comes from one of the hosts of a massive spooky podcast, one that is an inspiration to me and so many others. MJ from Espooky Tales provides us with tonight's main feature, something experienced by her grandfather and told to her father and then to her, about an encounter with one of the most well-known cryptids out there, El Cadejo. Stay inside and hope you don't hear his growl as you listen and enjoy in a spooky tale. It was sometime in the 50s. I cannot remember the exact year. As time goes on, my memory slows with it. I lived on a farm, part of a small rural community. The population was roughly 300 or so people. Outside of our little town, There was not a sign of civilization for many kilometers. We were very much in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by a semi-desert and wilderness. That was the life of a vaquero in rural Mexico. We always heard stories of brujas and other creatures roaming the Mexican wilderness. Many people in my pueblo did not leave the safety of its streets at night, and those like me who had to tend to animals, we did so in groups, or at the very least in partners, and always carrying a rifle and a machete. On this particular night, I was on my own. It was a full moon, and felt as if I did not require anyone at my side besides my horse. I had just left the town's local cantina after drinking the night away. Having to travel several kilometers, even on horse it would take an hour, if not more, to reach my farm. The moonlight was brilliant tonight, illuminating the desert in its glow. I had felt uneasy since I left the cantina, like something was watching me, following me, lurking in the shadows where the moonlight couldn't reach it. The shadows the cacti and the desert trees cast moved unnaturally. I rationalized it by blaming it on my drunkenness. I could not shake the feeling of eyes watching me, and constantly looked all around my surroundings. Paranoid with an unknown fear, the trail was empty besides me and my horse. I turned back to look behind me, and looked forward, and that's where it stood, blocking the trail, cutting me off from my destination. A black dog with glowing red eyes. It appeared out of nowhere, growling menacingly. My horse began to buck in panic and fear. I sobered up quickly and regained control of my horse as this dog began snapping at my horse's ankles, pulling it away from the path and running away from this creature. It kept up to speed with us, and then started floating and running beside me, its eyes glowing a deep and bright red. This cat and mouse game carried on for several minutes. After a while, I could see my farm. We turned our backs to it and continued to go towards my home as fast as my horse could. Turning my back to it was a mistake. I could feel its warmth on my back and its hot breath on my neck. It was also on top of my horse. The droplets of water from its breath trickled down my neck, making my blood run cold. We had made it to my farm when this creature disappeared. It was no longer breathing on me. The shadows surrounding my home moved in the most grotesque way, pulling and trying to break free. When I go out at night, even in the company of others, I feel the presence of this Cadejo, watching me, stalking me, moving with the shadows. I can still feel its hot breath on me as I drift off into sleep. What a story for Latin horror. A Latin American author, a cryptid from Latin American folklore, El Cadejo, stalking, hunting, and her grandfather escapes just in time. Hopefully not all you fleshbags will be so lucky, because my friend Cadejo, he needs to eat too. So I'm sorry in advance for tripping you. Now I believe there's enough scares for this week. I hope you will join me again next week for more stories that are sure to keep you afraid during the day and awake at night. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the stories I had for you tonight. And until next time.
Stay spooky.